Well, thanks again. We don't want to bore you too much, and I know there's a lot of technical things to go through, so this is not extremely technical, but it was good, to give you an overview of why we're here. And then Eleni was able to go through a lot of the crypto background that you may or may not need to know every piece of it, but kind of understand, the difference between Diffie-Hellman and RSA and ephemeral and why they want to go that direction and how we got in this predicament. And it was great that Steve could show an enterprise example of the problems that we had and how it's very real and how it affects us day to day. I want to go through just a little bit of the journey. So it's not technical, it's just kind of a, hey, this is what happened and how we got to where we are in our next steps. Before I do that, I was asked too, if we could just kind of do a quick around the room. I know we a lot of times do that. We didn't do it today, but you don't need to say the name of your company if you don't want, but if you could just say your name and kind of what your interest is or what brought you here. If you'd mind going first, we met at the CMG last week, so thank you.
Yeah, that's true. My name is Jim Fife. I work for a business partner northwest of Minneapolis known as Evolving Solutions. My role is as E-Systems Solution Architect. I'm the technical lead for the mainframe environment. Now, what's neat about it is I actually retired from Big Blue in November of last year after 36 years on that platform. I mean, it was awesome. And timing is everything in life, The owner, Jamie Gamak, is actually kind of brought me in as the architect. And one of the neat things about working for a partner, in order to sell mainframes, you have to own a mainframe. So he asked me to configure it. And it was a bit of champagne taste and some beer budgets. But it's a rather interesting one. We got a 13S with a DSAK, and we support clients in the Twin Cities areas. I live in Chicago, just north of it. I fly up every week. It's been nice. And I have a security background. I've got, through ISC Squared, the CISSP, ISSMP, and I've had that for some number of years. So it's a bit of me.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to see if this microphone works because we do have about 20 people on the phone as well. So if you'd like to try this, you have to keep it really close for it to work. Thanks.
I'm Chris Gockel. I work for Delta Airlines. I'm mostly on the load balancer, reverse proxy, and firewall space. So.
David Miller with Delta as well, and I'm in what we refer to as our governance team, which is for PCI compliance and making sure exactly what he's been doing kind of gets done, kind of that thing. So.
Great, and you can't do governance if you can't see what you're looking at, right? Exactly. You guys know Daryl Black, I think he spent 30-some years over there doing the same thing.
So I'm Scott Lindquist. I'm with Target Retail here locally. We do a lot of performance troubleshooting and user experience material, and I've been doing as much as I can to try and support our friends here with the initiative at hand. And, I know this visibility is crucial, so I want to do my best to try and help us keep that and not lose or go into the dark, if you will.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate your support.
Hi. My name is Bill Juris. I'm currently with EDCO. I have background before that at Bank of America, Kaiser Permanente, Charles Schwab. So I've been out in the trenches. And I'm going to be talking, I think, next about some of the stuff that's going on at ICANN that's going to make everybody's lives a little more exciting.
Steve Brown, Director of Product Marketing or Solutions Marketing for Enterprise at Viavi Solutions. Background has basically been in network performance monitoring and also spent several years with data loss protection vendors, so DLP. Interest is really understanding how we can best help our customers with these visibility challenges. Obviously, they're also the same visibility challenges that we're going to be facing as well. So understanding how we can best be a resource in this effort is the most important thing for me.
Thank you.
Charles Thompson. I run product management for Viavi Solutions. So as a vendor in this space, obviously very interested in understanding all the challenges that are associated with making the changes to the standards in order to be able to ensure the appropriate level of visibility and obviously maintain security for the end users.
Rob Solfest, IT leader, application network performance management, and data analytics. Obviously, very interested in this topic.
I am Tom Kahn. I'm with a company called Tanio with focus on performance, visibility, and security. And I'm very interested in this area, not only because of where I'm at now, visibility is needed, but I've made a living selling solutions in this area for about the last 15 years. So this could be a real showstopper.
Hi, I'm Tom Pachetti. I work for a company called Turbonomics. It's all about optimizing your application performance in virtual environments. But I'm mainly here because I run the local computer measurement group I have since 2000, which is this is affiliated with. So if you want to catch any of our local events, I do security-centric ones as well. Darren's been at a number of my events. In fact, the next one is going to be on security with Darren. We just have to work out
it's right here in this room, actually. Yeah, January maybe.
And we have some great security topics. There's a guy that lives in town that wrote a book on the secret Chinese electronic warfare. He's presented a number of times in the past. I have a number of other speakers lined up as well. So, thank you.
Great, thanks, Tom.
My name's Steve Knight. I'm the local Gigamon salesperson here supporting Darren's efforts with the IETF and the TLS issues. We were the creator of the visibility market, our fabric space, back in 2004, so our interest is very keen in that area and want to do whatever we can to support your efforts to help enable your cause. So I'm here to listen and learn.
I'm Tony Stieber at Wells Fargo. I'm a cryptographic information security systems architect.
Jim Tarpey with United Health Group Optum. I'm kind of a Steve Venter clone on the healthcare side of the business, although we are also a bank. So we have all of the same concerns, the same requirement to have visibility into that deep packet inspection.
Great. Thanks, Jim. If I can pause just for a second, I want to thank you for joining the last TLS session in July. Jim got up at, 3:30 in the morning to join that session, which was very animated. And I want to say that if for people that can't travel, which is many of us, joining the video session is an opportunity to be a part of this. And if you can make comments on the video session, they'll use that as well. When the presentation's over, there's a mic in the middle of the room, and there was about 20 some people that all spoke on it, some for, some against, and the TLS leaders of the working group sit in the front, and they take the presentation, they take a temperature of what people say, so for or against, and then they sometimes come to a vote, not their term, but a vote of rough consensus of who wants to go. So I would encourage you to join like Jim via video. If you can't make it, that's a great way to go. We'll talk more about EDCO later, but thank you very much. And you want to say another word?
Yeah, I'll say that it was quite an experience that I'd never been through before. There were quite a few people from corporate and commercial, businesses, vendors, Cisco, all the major players were there and speaking about their concerns about loss of that visibility.
Mm-hmm.
I just wish that whole session was longer than an hour or an hour and 20 minutes. It could have gone on for 4 to 6 hours.
They time boxed it so that it would actually end.
Yeah, damn them.
I know, but thanks again for joining on the video. That helps so much. And just so people know, when you join, Jim and I were emailing back and forth a little bit, and it's very animated. And I'm not going to deny it. And they were like up there at the mic, and they're saying, "But this, but that. I want to talk more." Well, it kind of got pretty animated, and you really have to just say, whatever they say, I'm here because I need this. And I'm not going to be impacted by what they say. In this case, it was a Scottish professor that knew the other side of it quite well, and spoke to why he didn't want to have it. But you just kind of have to stick to your guns and say, and our approach has been to be very calm, very fact-based, professional, and I got to say that it's not always that way. Sometimes they're throwing things out. They may even cuss a little bit. It could be anything, it's really it's wide open. But when you get there and you hear this, it was new to us, it was new to Jim. But as we go through it, just go ahead and say your piece on what's important to you. And you're there as an individual. You don't have to mention the name of your company. If that's an issue, don't even mention it. Just say, I'm Joe, and I'm here because I support them, and I need it to do my job. Thank you very much. Next person. You know, it can be as simple as that. But sorry to keep holding off here. Go ahead.
My name is Chris Marcotte. I'm a IPS IDS security engineer with a local healthcare company. And I'm just looking to see what's next and what's coming down the pipe for the next thing.
Great. Thanks for joining.
Thanks. I'm Paul Barrett from NetScout Systems. I'm CTO for Enterprise Operations. Through our Arbor division, we've actually been sort of actively involved in some of the discussions for the last few meetings. I absolutely believe the correct way to address this issue is through the standards. I'm a standards guy. Been doing it for 20 years in 3GPP and ITU. The observation I'd make is, the thing about standards is, it's a time when often you have to get together as an industry and you sit down with your competitors, the guys you go out normally and compete with day in, day out. Well, this is a time when you've got to stand together and protect the industry. And then when we figured it out and set the standards, then we can all go back to competing. So I would just say that based on many years' experience. Thank you.
Well put.
I'm Pat Moriarty. I'm the regional director for NetScout. So obviously, not as a corporate impact from Paul's perspective, we want to support Darren and Steve and our customers in the area as well.
Thanks, Pat. I think we've been through the speakers haven't introduced themselves. I think they probably need no introduction at this point. I know we have some people on the phone remotely. Is there anyone that'd like to introduce themselves, their name? And once we're done with that, I can run through quickly what we've been up against and how we've tackled it.
Let's see.
Let me just check in quick if there's any. Would anybody like to speak up or?
Let me see if anybody has somebody. Yeah, please go ahead and raise your hand. Yeah, virtually raise your hand and I can unmute you. Yeah, here's Conrad. Conrad, do you want to say anything? I've unmuted you.
Yeah, just I'm Conrad Sanders. I work at US Bank, and I know Darren Nalini and Steve very well. So interested in the TLS 1.3 stuff and everything else to be going on, these changes.
Thanks, Conrad. And he works on the mainframe side of the house, and he was hosting, I think, the first meeting where Steve sat in and learned about this, right? So a lot of history there.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you so much, Conrad. And yeah, let me say one thing before I turn it back to Darren. You know, again, from an IETF point of view, you know, I want people to have a lot of passion. I want people to feel like not necessarily I care so much I'm gonna cuss at people, but I want people to be really passionate and really care an awful lot about what happens. And that's what happens. I mean, I'm just gonna say, I mean, I think what Paul said was just incredibly wonderful. You know, thank you so much. It is a time to pull together, but it's a time for the world to pull together too, and people at IETF to pull together. We're really helping protect the internet, and everybody sitting in this room really needs to be a part of it to help everybody. And you know, I mean, I know there's been plenty of times when I've been in tears after IETF sessions. You know, I've been in tears, but then you wipe your tears off, you say, okay, come back in, and then and you just go back in for the fight. That's just how it is. If you care a lot, it happens. But nothing good technically is gonna happen if you don't care an awful lot.
Very true. Very true. And you know what rhymes with tears? Beers. And I know you can drink some beers. So we are going to have a happy hour after this. Another vendor has graciously sponsored that for us. We've been getting a lot of industry support. We appreciate it very much. We're going to look at going over to Cowboy Jack's, and towards the end of the presentation, we should have hopefully an idea of where we're going to meet there. We're going to try to get a corner room that allows us to visit a little bit there and talk, because a lot of us don't get a chance more than a couple of times a year to visit and get up to speed on things. So I want to get the beer announcement out. That's important. I don't want to be holding you up from beers. That's later. But let me just go through real quick what's happened here. We alluded a little bit to finding out about it last summer. Steve went to Berlin and learned a little bit more about what was going on and whether RSA could be brought back or not. Came back, we talked it over some more. We talked to some of our partners in the Financial Services Roundtable and their BITS technical organization, and said, you know what, this is an industry issue. How about, well, they're financials, but how about if you send out an email on everybody's behalf and let them know that this is a concern and we'd like to get this fixed. And we're kind of naive and we're thinking, oh, I just got to change this around. We'll be fine and have a good day. It's kind of fun. So we sent the email in September and we received 100+ replies. We were able to glean a few technical solutions out of that. But there were also a lot of negative replies, including verbatim, we've swept up the ashtrays and dumped them out, and the beers all dumped out, and the party's over, and don't bother coming. This is a done deal. But to think about the audience, you know, they're not enterprise folks that need this. They're developers that want things to go quick. They're privacy guys that love the security. It's not all that good stuff, but it's got to be balanced, and it wasn't. So we said, well, we're not getting anywhere. We're going to have to go to the next meeting. Steve, where's the next meeting? And he said, it's in Seoul, Korea. That's a long ways, costs a lot of money. Maybe where's the next one? It's in Chicago. Well, we should go there. And he said, it's going to be done with by then. We really got to get in and figure this out sooner. We got to let them know about this issue. We've been 3 years late to the party. We got to get over there. So, okay. So we shared it with our CISO, Jason, that he alluded to, and as they fed their tools, and he joined in just both feet. It was great support. It's been helpful all along the way. I said, well, let's go to Seoul. And Steve presented much of the same slides, very, very complete. Everybody understood what he was talking about, but as a, I wouldn't say hostile room, but it was pretty animated. They really weren't wanting to change what they had already created. So Jason got up there, and to his credit, he says, well, I'm Jason. I'm on the security side of the house. Everything Steve said, just put in a security tool. I'm done. Let's spend the rest of the time on questions. And before we start, I am a 3rd-degree black belt, so just keep it in mind because I hear you're kind of hostile. Who's first? And it was, you know, everybody chuckled a little, we laughed and loosened things up a little bit, and they're starting to understand it a little bit more. You know, Steve brought a lot of legitimacy to what we needed to do, and the conversation was good. We had a lot of good comments there from the microphone. You know, maybe 80-20 positive, somewhere around there. It was pretty good, but yet in the room, if you voted, which luckily we did, they wouldn't have carried. We wouldn't have carried the vote. But the good thing after that is that a gentleman from PayPal turned around at the end and said, you know what, we have the exact same problem. You want to work together on this? Well, sure. He said, by the way, let's talk about technical solutions next. We're in California. You're in Minnesota. Where do you think people want to visit more in January? So Steve and I went to California, along with our key custodian, because keys have a very close tie into all of this. And the key rotation has been a big topic. And, you know, the purists say, well, let's do this every second or 10 seconds. And the realists say this is a multi-year operation. And we know that's too long and 10 seconds is too short. So again, how do you find some balance that works for people? And really, keys are locally significant. It's a weight of risk of changing them, because every time you change them, you can't go back anymore because they have some mass storage concerns there. But it costs a lot of money to rotate your keys more frequently, whether it's people or automation or both. It's a local risk decision. However, we know it must be done more often. So that's a big tie into the solution. But we went out there, we looked at the various options with a lot of different people, and there's probably about 30 people in the room. And we decided that static Diffie-Hellman would definitely be one way to figure this out. Seems to scale pretty good. Logging of ephemeral keys was also mentioned as a possible solution. And some of these guys in the room are very sharp. I mean, I'm just so humbled. I'm like, why am I even in this room? But listening in, taking all this in, and looking at different ways to do things. We've spent about another month or two. We went to the IETF meeting in Chicago, and we had a EDCO meeting on Saturday. Monday morning early, we had a meeting just to talk about those solutions and solidify what's our approach, because we want to get some time, spend some time on this, figure out which way to go forward. At the time, we decided that there'd been a lot of work done in static Diffie-Hellman. We talked about it there, and we said, okay, for Prague in July, we're going to go ahead with static Diffie-Hellman as our proposed solution. And we had to hire some consultants. We had cryptographers from Johns Hopkins University. We had people who own their own security business, CTOs of key management companies. I mean, the guy that created DHCP 20-some years ago was helping us out. more of a route switch guy, but he has a presence at the IETF. They know who he is, you know, and we don't have that presence. We've only been to, what, 4 or 5 maybe at the most now, and that's a relative newcomer. I mean, they measure time in more like decades. So it was great to have some of their help. Then along the way in the spring, NIST, which is the security government agency that people look to see from the security world to see what should I implement, have been talking to somebody from the IETF, and they decided we have a 2-day conference. We're going to add a 3rd day invite only, and we're just going to bring some people that are interested in this in key rotation. We want to get a pulse for how important is this to people. Should we take this on? Is this something we should do? We heard about it last minute. Well, it came about last minute, and Steve Fenter was able to fly out to DC and attend that. Many of us, Jim, others joined on the phone call, and we were able to let them know this is indeed something very important to us. Please put some effort into it. And I always get this wrong, Steve. It's the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence. Is that right? Okay, first beer. They said, yeah, we're going to take this on, and we're going to work on this, and we're going to have some vendors invited to this thing once you come up with a solid solution, and we're going to figure out with code how this can be done in an interoperable way that'll take care of everyone's needs, so that once IETF says this is a standard, here's an RFC to point to, now we have interoperable code, because then the vendors must implement the code, and then we got to do change requests and test it all out and everything, and finally implement the code. And our hope is to have all this done before people like PCI or HIPAA force us to 1.3. So that's kind of the big picture of what we were trying to do. We talked a little bit about going to Prague in July. It was a very interesting time. Let's just say that we're all very well known at the IETF. Too well, I would say. But when we got up there, Steve did a presentation along with Bill Polk of NIST. Russ Housley spoke a little bit about how it isn't wiretapping. He showed the definition and said this is not what we're doing. So this is not wiretapping, so forget that argument. And one other presenter. Matt Green. Oh, Matt Green, our cryptographer, also spoke to crypto analysis. So I'm not a cryptographer. I'm a route switch guy, turned into a performance guy, doing some management along the side because if somebody needs to do it, and I kind of got it figured out a little bit. But anyways, he spoke to how secure it would be. And along the way, we had sent out, this new proposal. And that got its own set of responses, some positive, some negative. And so when we got there, they're pretty primed to talk about this. It was the buzz everywhere was go to this session, bring popcorn, figure this out. Let's go see what's going on. Every time I'd hear about this, I'd say, the interesting thing about that is that our group is one of the ones that brought this here. It was kind of funny, I know, but could I tell you why we want to do it? Oh, geez, yeah, sure, okay. And then, so that's we have all these hallway sessions, and we have a schedule: breakfast, lunch, dinner, drinks. We had all of these times we're talking to people, and in between that, you might go to some good sessions. You might talk to some people in the hallway. It's kind of different because there's no set schedule. You're used to that at work, right? We're going to talk to this guy at 10 o'clock. No, not that really that way. It's just there's some, and then you fill in the rest as you go. So it's kind of dynamic. But anyway, we got to the room, and they all presented why we want to do it, and the Irish professor explained why he didn't think they should do it, and then it came to a vote, and that's where we got the 50-50 vote, which a lot of you like me will say, 50-50? I don't know why you're so excited about 50-50 to me. I'm not good at spelling, but that's numbers for you. And like I say, from Korea, I always say the locations, but we all do, but from November to July, going from about 5 people to maybe 125 people, that's a big swing. And it's the first time we had a vote, and it really showed. We were, I would say, positively shocked that we had that much support. We were very happy to see it. Kind of some of our talking paid off. So if we have 50%, let's say there's another 25% that say, hell no, I'm never coming off this dime. I want it as pure as possible. That leaves about 25% of people to work with if you have the same audience. So we spent the rest of the week talking to people that weren't happy with what we said to try to help them understand why and change some opinions. We tackled some of the toughest people. We tackled the ACLU. We tackled people that were very serious about the TLS working group. They were talked a lot when they spoke. People listened. One gentleman from Sydney in particular. I think one of the nicest comments I got was I should tell you that they offered up a solution called client opt-in. And we can go into that more detail later if you're interested, but it goes from a static solution to an ephemeral solution, which really makes all the groups, I would say, as happy as they're going to be. I think it takes care of a lot of their solutions. Of course, there's some people that would only be happy if it was absolutely locked down, nobody could ever see it in their whole life. But then they'd be unhappy if there was an outage and people stole their numbers, right? Their information. So again, it all comes back to that balance. But where was I at? So we had that meeting and we found that new solution, and with a 50-50 vote, we have the ability now to come back and try to gain their hearts and minds, really, with that elusive other 25%. And that's where either we can change some of their minds, or we can add new people, or we can do both. So that's where we're trying to get some support from industry, which has been great. Support from other companies. You could join the mailing list. Definitely, if you can get on that video and put in a comment, that helps more than you would ever imagine. And I know it's not a good time. The next one is in Singapore, and it's like 30 hours just to get there. It's I don't know what the time zone difference is, but like maybe 17 hours, something like that. So we can figure out the times, and if you would be so willing as to get up one night and put in a few notes, that would help a lot.
You'll be 84 miles north of the equator.
84 miles north.
I was there once.
I was in the Philippines, right next to it in the Air Force, and yeah, I would agree with you. It's hot and wet or hot and dry. Those are the two seasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely can use all the support that we can get on that. So when we walked away from that, and the vote was again for the need for a visibility solution, not for a specific solution. After leaving there and getting those suggestions, I was going to say the funniest thing that I heard from that guy was that our solution was the least offensive. That was the term. Like, wow, that's kind of good, right? But it was kind of good because knowing that they wanted full security was their optimum, to say this is least offensive is kind of good. So we went back and we've been working with these consultants and trying to come up with this new solution. Many of us are route switch guys, not developers. So we've had to bring in consultants that make good money figuring this stuff out, but they are the experts. They know this stuff, and cryptography isn't my field, and they are knee deep in it. And I know the business outcome of it, and I'm very happy with what they've come up with thus far. We're going to release it to the community early this time, so we're more than a month out. So our hope is that they can take it, work it up, whatever their deal is, digest it, and say, hey, I think this is something we can live with, or not, or whatnot. And then when we get there to talk about it, maybe they're settled down a little bit and we can have some really good conversations and then come up, hopefully they say, yeah, we understand you need to do it. And our goal, of course, like I said, is working group adoption, which is by that vote, which is so important, and we're underrepresented. So that's my last little pitch on try to help us out any way that you can to swing that vote. And we can get more information out on that. And we've been in contact with the working group leaders, talking to them, trying to get a pulse for what we should present, when we should present, when should they take a vote, those kind of things. I know this is a lot of international travel. It's tough to do, but after Singapore, next March is London IETF meeting. So it is still international, but much closer. So if anybody's able to join us there, that is also very appreciated. A lot of companies have international offices in London as well. So sometimes easier to get to, but I've talked a lot. Any questions for me on this in particular? No?
Just a comment or an assumption. That 50-50 vote, that was a counted vote and not a humming vote?
There is no counting, it's all humming.
It was all humming.
So you can imagine grown adults sitting up straight and humming as loud as they can.
50-50.
It's crazy. It was very, very understandable that it was 50-50. And they You know, I haven't been in a lot of them, but I have some, you know, if they're 80% that the majority wants to do something and the other 20%, it's much quieter. You can kind of tell the difference. You can't come up to numbers, but 50-50, it was so close. We're just, wow, okay.
There's an app for that. You can download.
There's an app for everything, isn't there?
You can download a decibel meter and record.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Steve?
One question I had with Steve Fedner. There was the talk about how you could run external 1.3 and internal 1.2. Yet one of the things that you guys were talking about was regulation standards pushing you towards that 1.3. With general data protection regulations coming on in May 2018, I've got to wonder how realistic that window is to have. It's largely a non-prescriptive, meaning they don't actually say that you must have this. The one thing they do call for is encryption. And so that in my mind would be like, it would seem like that window, if it is even realistic, would be very, very short.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
So to reiterate it for the people on the phone, GDPR is General Data Protection Regulation.
Yep, it's
coming out of the EU.
EU privacy mandates. Any company who, I mean, think about it this way. If you're a company that does business, collect, process, store information on EU citizens, you're going to be impacted by it. I mean, and that's just, so that's probably about, when I was looking at the studies, 90% of large United States companies, you've got operations overseas. You're interacting just because you have a website or you sell services online that can be distributed internationally with EU citizens. And so, you know, you're probably not going to just clean up that side of the house. You're going to probably implement it corporate wide.
Right. And then if you do too much encryption, you can't see it. That becomes a problem, exactly. Right? And I've kind of interesting on the security side. I've seen two camps from the same camp. One saying we want the most secure protocol ever possible. And the other one saying we have to see it to provide our services. But they're opposite, right? And that comes back to the balance again. And everything's about balance. Thank you. Bill?
One other thing on GDPR. ICANN is starting to look at how they're going to implement this, which means changing the who is function. And if that changes, it changes for everybody. And if you do security, almost certainly at some point you're using that function.
Mm-hmm. Very true. I think that's a good segue into ICANN, but first let's take a break here.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm Bill Juris. As I mentioned, I'm with EDCO. I was going to start this off by saying, well, now for something that isn't really technical, except it is. It's not IT technical, it's linguistics technical. ICANN, for those of you who haven't encountered it, is the Internet Corporation for Addresses, Names, and Numbers. If you want a new IP address at your company, they're the ones you go to. Probably they're 2 or 3 generations up the path, but they're the ones who say, okay, this block of addresses goes to North America, this block goes to Africa. They also
I just want to make sure it's starting to record.
Oh, okay. They also make the rules on what domain names look like. If you want to look at the IETF as like Congress making the rules, ICANN is like the SEC or the EPA. They make the regulations that actually implement those rules. So I'll make it work. One of the things that's happening currently is the internationalization of domain names. As I'm sure you're all aware, the internet was invented as a U.S. government project, and so domain names are done in English. At 26 letters, numbers from 0 to 9, and a hyphen. Well, the rest of the world thought it would be nice if they could write domain names in their own languages. Thank you very much. So we've started looking at, first off, other character sets like Chinese or Japanese, other alphabets, Cyrillic, Arabic, Japanese, whatever. And there are task groups looking at each of those, saying, first off, what's the repertoire? What symbols are we going to allow? Which ones will we not allow? And then secondly, which symbols look too much like each other that we won't, if you register one, we won't let you register using the other interchangeably. The Latin-based test words has a little more work to do. There are something like 140 plus languages that are written using a Latin-based alphabet. And the way that works is they use diacritic marks, little bits and pieces that go above the letter, below the letter, through the letter, whatever. And there are several dozen of those. So when we're figuring out the repertoire, some diacritic marks can be used with some letters, but not with others. So there's a long process to figure out what the repertoire is. And then, because diacritic marks are subtle, you have to figure out what conflicts. The good news for this whole repertoire effort is that almost everybody involved is a linguist. And that's what linguists do for a living, is look at letters and stuff like that. And so they can see all of those. The bad news is all the people involved are linguists. And so they see differences that you wouldn't see. They've divided the differences into two groups: variants, which are identical, and confusables, which aren't quite. So in this first example, the first .com is written in Cyrillic, not in Latin. And as you can see, the C and the O are identical to the ones in Latin. But the lowercase m, Cyrillic, doesn't look like the lowercase m in Latin alphabet. So if you say, unless they're identical, you can register them, you could register .com in Cyrillic as a high-level domain name. As I pointed out a few weeks ago to them, yes, it's true that domain names are registered strictly in lowercase, but it's also been true for a couple of decades that software, if you type a domain name with uppercase letters, will just cheerfully fix that for you when it's processing it. So if something looks like CO and a capital M, nobody in the real world, i.e. non-linguists, will notice. So maybe that should be a variant and therefore blocked as well. Then we get into diacritics. This is just 3 examples with the letter E. Basic letter E with a brev, letter E with a macron. Yeah, you can probably see the difference between the two with the diacritic mark versus the one without. But if you look at those two with the diacritic mark, and then think about you're looking at it in an email in 12-point type, can you tell the difference? If you can't, I don't know if you can, how well you can see here. One of them is curved, the other one has straight sides. For a linguist, that's a meaningful definition. He'll never notice. He'll notice that those are two different things. For the rest of the world, not so much. Perhaps the parallel for you, if you want to hire a programmer and you get 3 resumes, one says Java programmer, one says HTML programmer, one says COBOL programmer. Are those meaningful differences to you? Darn right they are. Only one of them is going to be able to do your job. If you're somebody in finance who's decided to hire a contractor to write you a quick program, you'll look at those and go, hey, there are 3 programmers. I need a programmer. I'm all good. The linguists are like, yes, we see the differences. The others don't. Here's an example. I've picked on Nationwide Insurance for no good reason at all. If there's somebody on the phone from there, no offense intended. There's a symbol that's used, among other places in Turkish, called a dotless I. And so if you look at this first example, as opposed to the second one, you'll see the I's don't have dots over them. If you're a linguist, you'll spot that. If you're not a linguist, almost certainly you won't. And if you do notice that it's different, I don't know about you, but my first reaction is, drat, when did I have a couple pixels die on my display? You know, just to emphasize how easy it is to miss these, notice that the second one isn't Nationwide's website either. If you look closely at the E, you'll see there's a little bitty diacritic mark at the bottom of it. That makes it different. So we've had discussions over how should that be considered a variant, and therefore if you register one, the other one is blocked? Or do we say, it's confusable, so we're going to have somebody manually look at it to see if it's going to be a problem? Or do we just decide, no, that's no problem, don't worry about, you know, the linguists all know. So one of the reasons I'm here pitching this is it's not just IETF that needs people with broader backgrounds showing up. I'd be delighted to have a couple, and I can as well. And finally, this one, just because it's so much fun, the first one, as totally obvious to you, is 4 letters rather than 3. Look closely, that's .corn, not COM. Anybody want to bet that your customers will notice that? ICANN has expanded beyond .com, .gov, .org, etc. So you now can register with a high-level domain of .bank, .mall. Well, if the people who some bunch of farmers say, we want .corn, why not? And minutes after ICANN decides to allow that, every major financial institution in the world is going to see their domain name, .corn, registered, probably not to them. The possibility, you know, this isn't an IT technical problem, but these obvious security implications, you know, all of a sudden your customers think they're logging into your website. Nope. And especially because anybody with a little HTML skill can go into your customer logon page, pull up the source, make a duplicate of it, and then put a .com or .corn, whatever, page together, take the ID and password, make a copy of it, transmit them over and shove them into the real logon for your bank, and hey presto, you've logged in, you're fine, you know, you can see your account, but now they've got the information to access your account. It's not even going to even be difficult. So this is the same pitch that Nalini and Steve and everybody have been making. If you can see where this might be a problem for you, you might want to think seriously about getting, maybe not you as technical people, maybe what you want is your security people, but you want to get somebody starting to show up at ICANN to point out, you know, in the real world, with the 99+% of the population that isn't linguists, we need to write the rules for them so they don't have a problem.
Yeah. So I was just wondering when ICANN meets, or if you could share a little information. Is it the same as IETF or different?
They're different but similar. They also bounce around the world. The next ICANN meeting is the first week in November, or no, the last week in October in Abu Dhabi. So that's, I don't remember if that's the same week as IETF or the week before, but right on top of it. So we're there. The good news is, for instance, the panel that's dealing with the Latin alphabet stuff meets Adobe chat room, conference call, whatever you want to call it, a couple times a week by phone. So it's not a matter of just showing up physically. Wouldn't be too bad if you're here. It's a little painful for me because I'm in California and the meeting's at 5 a.m. for me. 7 a.m. you could probably live with. But it's, most of the people involved are in Europe and they don't want to get too much later because they want to get home to dinner. Any other questions on this?
Thank you so much, Bill.
Yeah.